your own neighbors, friends, and family who work tirelessly to provide goods and services for all of us. While riding the waves of change and staying apart for now, we look forward to the near future when we'll be together again. Hi, this is Richard Vixoric, Mayor of Dana Point. As we navigate these uncharted waters, Dana Point residents and businesses have proven to be resilient. While we can't gather together at our favorite beaches, shops, restaurants, or trails, our connections remain strong. Now is the time to think of one another and find new ways to connect, lift each other up, and assist our neighbors in any way we can. Remember to shop local, purchase gift cards, post a kind review, book future excursions and staycations, and order your favorite meal to go to support our business community, as they have supported our community and our families for many years. Remember, behind your favorite shops, restaurants, and businesses are people, your own neighbors, friends, and family who work tirelessly to provide goods and services for all of us. While riding the waves of change and staying apart for now, we look forward to the near future when we'll be together again. Hi, this is Richard Vixoric, Mayor of Dana Point. As we navigate these uncharted waters, Dana Point residents and businesses have proven to be resilient. While we can't gather together at our favorite beaches, shops, restaurants, or trails, our connections remain strong. Now is the time to think of one another and find new ways to connect, lift each other up, and assist our neighbors in any way we can. Remember to shop local, purchase gift cards, post a kind review, book future excursions and staycations, and order your favorite meal to go to support our business community, as they have supported our community and our families for many years. Remember, behind your favorite shops, restaurants, and businesses are people, your own neighbors, friends, and family who work tirelessly to provide goods and services for all of us. While riding the waves of change and staying apart for now, we look forward to the near future when we'll be together again. Hi, this is Richard Vixoric, Mayor of Dana Point. As we navigate these uncharted waters, Dana Point residents and businesses have proven to be resilient. While we can't gather together at our favorite beaches, shops, restaurants, or trails, our connections remain strong. Now is the time to think of one another and find new ways to connect, lift each other up, and assist our neighbors in any way we can. Remember to shop local, purchase gift cards, post a kind review, book future excursions and staycations, and order your favorite meal to go to support our business community, as they have supported our community and our families for many years. Remember, behind your favorite shops, restaurants, and businesses are people, your own neighbors, friends, and family who work tirelessly to provide goods and services for all of us. While riding the waves of change and staying apart for now, we look forward to the near future when we'll be together again.
Hello, this is
Hey,
Jenny.
Jenny.
Did you just get those, Kurt? Did you just get those? Oh, you went lucky.
I don't know if I can.
I miss mine.
Do you wear
Yeah.
contacts? I squint. I have glasses. I try not to live in. They slip down my face. Well, he does it. Well, it's like even weird. Is he had it like at the end of the nose. I'm like, it needs to work. You know,
I know what it looks like. My kids have already told me.
I think so, yes, but I'm going to stay at home.
All right, I'll go ahead and call to order the Planning Commission meeting of Wednesday, May 7th. I'm going to ask Senior Planner Nicholas to lead us in the pledge tonight.
Thank you. Please rise. Hand over your heart. Begin. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So Madam Secretary, if you could do roll call for this evening, please.
Okay, please say present or here when I call your name. Chair Opal,
Present.
Vice Chair Nelson.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Donor.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Murphy.
Here.
Thank you. And Commissioner McCann.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to a approval of the meeting minutes from May 11th.
I move approval of the meeting minutes from May 11th. And Vice Chair Nelson, second, or right?
So if we could please poll the commissioners.
Okay, and we'll start with Chair Opal,
Aye.
Vice Chair Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Donor,
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy,
Okay.
and Commissioner McCann.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on to public comments. Do we have any requests to speak for this evening?
No, Chair Opal.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the consent calendar. We have no items on this evening's consent calendar. So we'll move on to public hearing item 2, the Local Coastal Program Amendment LCPA 19-0002, Zone Text Amendment ZTA 19-0002, related to accessory dwelling units, joint parking, and public notification. Is there a staff report this evening?
There is. Senior Planner Sean Nichols will provide us this presentation.
Thank you and good evening, Chair Opal, Planning Commissioner Sean Nicholas, Project Planner. This is for the LCPA and ZTA 19-002 for ADU, JADUs, joint parking, and public notification. As Planning Commission knows, on April 13th, you did conduct a public hearing in which you unanimously recommended approval to the City Council of the, again, the LCPA and ZTA before you. Following that approval, though, staff did receive comments from HCD, and while a majority of those comments were minor in nature, staff felt that due to the some of the topics being items of discussion by the Planning Commission, we felt it would be appropriate to bring it back for reconsideration of the ADU, JADU section. I want to be very clear that I'm going to focus on that this evening because no other changes have been made to the joint parking or the public hearing notification modifications that were approved by Commission on the 13th. So as I stated, jumping right into the ADU, JADU changes or portion of our discussion, it was recommended for approval on the April 13th meeting. The HCD recommended modifications primarily had to do with 3 items that were items of discussion for Planning Commission, having to do with the heights of the ADUs, unit size or bedroom limitations, and then ultimately provisions for cooking language. Supporting document 2 provides red lines of the HCD recommendation. So what that is, to be clear, is the black text is what the Planning Commission had approved on April 13th. And then the red strike through and underline were the resultant changes as a result of the HCD comments. So the big thing associated with height, HCD wanted it to be clear in the ordinance that 16 feet is an allowed maximum for any ADUs. Staff did go over the scenarios in which ADUs could be taller than 16 feet. And based on those parameters, HCD was supportive of the other scenarios to allow them to be higher than 16 feet. The size bedroom count, as the Planning Commission remembers, that it was recommended that it be 850 square feet and a 1-bedroom limitation. HCD expressed concerns regarding fair housing laws and the 1-bedroom limitation being out of compliance with that. And ultimately, HCD strongly encouraged us to utilize a 1,000 square foot ADU limitation instead of a bedroom or other type of limitation. They had said that they had seen that in a variety of other municipalities and were supportive of that. So what that means is that across the board, 1,000 square feet will be the limit, whether attached or detached. As I'm sure Planning Commission remembers, there was the standard 50% limitation for an attached ADU. So with this 1,000 square foot limitation, that has been fully removed, and we'll just rely on the 1,000 square feet. So for example, if it's a 2,400 square foot primary residence and they wanted to add an attached ADU, they could no longer go up to 1,200 square feet. Again, they would be limited only to 1,000. It does simplify the requirements, and so staff was supportive of the change because of the consistency across the board, whether attached or detached. Lastly, the issue associated with provisions for cooking, and I can tell you from staff's perspective, is we spent just an incredible amount of time on this definition and what does provision for cooking mean. Planning Commission had originally approved a definition which was based on our definition of kitchen from the Daniel Point zoning code. HCD requested the language come directly from the government code 65852.2, hence the wanting to utilize the language provisions for cooking. And so staff was concerned about that and wanted to make sure that it was a clear what the expectations were for provisions of cooking. And so HCD provided some additional language that we've incorporated into the ordinance this evening that states, at minimum, includes electrical outlets to plug in a hot plate, microwave, etc., subject to California building code requirements. And the key components there is we're still hitting all the life safety requirements, especially associated with electrical, and making sure loads are appropriate for those types of facilities placed in an ADU. So with that, that does conclude staff's staff report presentation regarding the proposed changes to the ADU, JADU portions. Staff does recommend the Planning Commission adopt the draft resolution, recommending again approval to the City Council. Staff is available if any of the Planning Commissioners have any questions.
Okay, I'm going to open it up for Commissioner questions. So Vice Chair Nelson, do you have any questions for staff?
Yes, Chair, I do. A couple questions. Hi, Sean. A couple questions for you as it relates to the comment about bedrooms and unit size limitations, and more specifically around the fair housing comment. Did HCD provide any clear, I guess I'm sort of dumbfounded by the comment from them that that a bedroom or a minimum requirement would somehow violate the Fair Housing Act. Did they provide any details as how that actually occurs?
So while we did not necessarily agree with HCD's recommendation, and we went back and forth with them, they felt that in essence that limiting it to the one bedroom was going to potentially limit the definition of family and how many people could be within an ADU unit. And so based on to get their approval, which is required now as of January 1st of this year, that they would not be supportive of anything that limited an ADU by bedrooms, but they were comfortable with the 1,000 square foot limitations with no reference to a bedroom limitation.
Okay, and are you aware, just for the later discussion that I think we should have, if there's any legislation that indicates that the law was set up in a way to permit an unlimited amount of bedrooms or limit the city's ability to restrict bedroom counts?
So this is Jennifer Farrell, and I'll go ahead and take that question. My reading of the law is that there is absolutely nothing in there that would limit a city's ability to limit the number of bedrooms. As Sean mentioned, HPD has taken a different position. They recognize that there is nothing in the statute that limits our ability to limit bedrooms. And I think perhaps recognizing that the legislature might have forgotten to add some language in along those lines, they've now come up with a position that limiting bedroom count would somehow be discriminatory towards familial status. I do not agree with that position. I think that their position, taken to maybe the extreme or actually just implemented as they've stated it to us, would mean that any development regulation imposed by a city, including, potentially even height requirements and FAR requirements and even setbacks, anything that would limit the number of size of a house would be discriminatory towards familial status, which is obviously absurd. So I think it's pretty clear that I disagree with HCD's interpretation, but at the end of the day, we do need their approval for the ordinance, so we're stuck in a little bit of a catch-22.
Okay, great. That's great. That's good comments, so thank you for that. So question answered. And then the next would be, I don't know that I have any other questions. Pretty straightforward. So that's it for questions. I certainly have comments, but we'll withhold those till after the questions.
All right, Commissioner Donor, do you have any questions for staff?
Yes. One on the height, it said we said the minimum height on a second story would be a minimum of 16 feet, and that seems like that would not be necessary if we said it would be to the maximum height of the house. Could this be on top of a garage, 16 feet above the height of the garage?
So, thank you, Commissioner Donor. So the requirement first and foremost says that a detached ADU shall be allowed to be a maximum of 16 feet in height. And that's under 5 subsection A. And then it goes on through B and C to give scenarios in which an ADU may go above 16 feet. And at that point, it becomes the determination based on the maximum height of the zone in which it's in, associated also with things like the roof pitch, which play a very critical part on determining what the maximum height can be. But a key component of that is that it's outside of the setback areas and is within the developable area of a primary structure in essence. And so, yes, it could go above a garage. It could be attached on a second story of an existing 2-story residence. But the key catch-all to that is if you're going to put a ADU above a garage or attached as a second story, component of a second story to a primary residence, the existing primary residence or proposed primary residence would also have to be 2 stories.
Sean, if I could just tack on to that, I think what Commissioner Donor is pointing out is that there's a typo in section 5A. I remember cleaning this up in some of our versions of the ordinance, but it slipped back in again. And 5A says right now, all detached ADUs shall be allowed to be a minimum of 16 feet in height. That minimum is a typo. That should be the word maximum. So it should read, all detached ADUs shall be allowed to be a maximum of 16 feet in height.
It does say maximum in the ordinance that's provided to them. It's to be a maximum of 16 feet in height.
So Sean, there's a typo and it reads minimum of 16 feet instead of maximum of 16 feet. So that's something we'll have to fix at a staff level.
Sean, one other question. Is there such a thing as a minimum size of a bedroom?
If there is, it would be dictated by the California Building Code. And I think that's probably going to be more related to exiting and things of that nature. And so that's where I would point that we have the regulations. We don't have anything in the zoning code regarding minimum size of a bedroom.
So the fair housing laws do not indicate anything related to the size of the bedrooms or the size of how many people could occupy the 1,000 square feet?
No, in terms of occupancy, that would be, again, based on the California Building Code.
And what would that be?
It would, again, it depends on exiting and those types of requirements, windows and doors and distances. And there's a whole calculation that is done by people who are much better at geometry and math than I am. And so there's a process and a procedure that is laid out in the California Building Code to determine the maximum occupancy of any room / total dwelling unit, if you will.
I guess I was really struggling with the fact that you were saying 1,000 square feet, which is fine in my opinion, because previously granny flats could be 1,200 square feet. So the 1,000 versus 850 was not a big issue, but not limiting either the number of people or the number of bedrooms doesn't make any sense to me. That's it.
This is Jennifer Farrell, and Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection is that the building code occupancy requirements are based off of the square footage of both bedrooms and all the other living spaces, so the living room area as well. It's not based just off of bedrooms. Am I accurate in saying that?
Yes, again, I think it's based on, again, exiting an area you have in each room.
Correct. So to Commissioner Donor's comment, HCD's HCD's concerns make even less sense, if you will, because it's not bedroom size that dictates occupancy limits. It's overall square footage of the habitable areas, generally speaking, with the exception of some calculations related to windows and whatnot.
Well, I guess my question, I don't know if it's a legal question or the code question is, can we refer to Dana Point has some limit on the number of people that can occupy a residence? Is that applicable to this?
Again, it would be.
Yeah, so this is Jennifer Farrell here, and I'll go ahead and take that, and Sean can type in if I miss anything. But all ADUs would have to comply with building code requirements. So they would have to comply with an occupancy limitation that is in the building code. It's generally a relatively high standard, meaning that a lot of people can occupy a very small space. Typically, when we've done the calculations, that's what we've determined. But the answer is yes. They will have to comply with all building code requirements, including any sort of limitation on occupancy.
Okay, thank you.
Jennifer, this is Danny. I have a question because I'm always a little confused. But with this one, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. The HCDs recommends referring to state law whenever possible instead of the local zoning code. Tell us how we got there. How did we end up without the local zoning codes, and we ended up with the HCD's recommendation?
Yeah, so if you recall, the first version of the ordinance that we brought to you referred to incorporated some provisions of state law, and when we referred to those provisions, we referred to them in terms of our zoning code, not necessarily in terms of the state code. HCD wants that to be changed. Substantively, at this point in time, it does not make a substantive difference. But down the line, I think what HCD is anticipating is that there will be amendments to the state law, and so they want to make sure that any of those references are, up to date as possible, by incorporating the state law references instead of the zoning code references.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Commissioner McCann, do you have any questions?
Yes. Jennifer, you talked about 5A having the typo. I think it's 5B on the minimum versus maximum, or at least in my version. That's true. Why did we add the part about making references to ministerial approval?
Commissioner McCann, can you repeat that question?
Did you hear my part about 5B having the typo and not 5A?
Yeah, so I'm looking at the clean copy, so this would be Exhibit B, and in my copy, it's 5A that has the typo. But whenever a motion is made, we can include language that basically says, staff will review the ordinance and make sure that the 16-foot height restriction is a maximum limitation, not a minimum limitation, and we'll take care of all of those typos if there is more than one. And then with respect to your question about the ministerial approval, that really was not a substantive change. In my view, all ADUs have to be approved ministerially. I think that was really the recommendation for the additional language to be included in the ordinance, I think was an attempt on HCD's part to really just be a belt and suspender approach. So not a substantive change.
Okay, so I guess, what you said earlier, because I take issue with some of the changes, that they recommended here, which you'll hear about in the comment section of the meeting. But I guess my question is, you know, you said that we're required to get their approval. I mean, why don't they just write it then? If we don't have any discretion on what we're doing here, what are we doing here?
Yes, I can tell you, from a personal standpoint, I agree with your comment. And it is a frustrating position to be in. Frankly, the law is incredibly poorly written. It's incredibly confusing, and there's a lot of inconsistencies within the document. And then you compile that with interpretations that a state agency is making that, in at least my opinion, are not consistent with the plain language of the statute or the legislative history. It does seem at some point like if they just wrote it for us, it might be a simpler process, but unfortunately we're stuck with the process that the legislature came up with, and we're trying to navigate through it as best we can.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
All right, and I have no questions. Most of mine were already asked and answered. So I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Are there any requests for public comment at this time?
No, Chair Opal.
All right, so I will now close the public hearing and move it forward to commissioner discussion. So does anyone want to take a lead on that?
This is Vice Chair Nelson. I'm happy to take the lead.
All right.
So I think, this is a definite a situation that's sort of unique. It's probably not something that we see very often, where we have an outside agency, in some cases, forming opinions that I don't believe are even, well, A, are inaccurate, and then B, potentially pushing their agenda versus what the legislature was requiring of us. And I think we have to always go back to look at, the intent of the legislation and what the words say as it relates to this stuff, and not necessarily just agree to something just because they say that's the way it has to be, or at least form our opinion and let the city council determine how they want to deal with this. Because I think when we start to let third parties determine arbitrarily, in many cases, especially here, that what they say is the way it's supposed to be, I would, similar to the question that Chairman McCann answered or asked relative to why do we do this? I think we're not doing our job if we push back on some of this stuff. So that is the narrative. I have a couple of concerns and some things I would not agree to, and I'll just lay those out and keep that open for. I'm open for discussion around them, and if you disagree, I'd love to talk about it. But the first one being the height issue. To me, that seems like semantics, and clearly we all know what it means. And frankly, I don't think it has a meaningful change to us. So I'm fine with it. I think it's sort of ridiculous that they want us to remove something that's inherent. But that being said, it's not something I'm going to fight over. But the second one, relative to bedroom count and unit size, I take exception to the idea that in any way this violates fair housing laws. And the thought that we, by exercising diligence, care, and thoughtfulness around what this means to our existing communities, somehow equates to us acting improperly under the federal housing laws. I work for a housing developer. I understand these laws. There's nothing in here in any way that would even get close to a fair housing law violation. And the idea that you can say it's a violation doesn't make it one. For the same reason you could call something a massage parlor, but if other things are going on there, it's not a massage parlor. So I take exception to that and don't agree at all that our very clear and rightful position to have a limit on unit size and bedroom count is spelled out clearly in state law. The law actually goes far enough to say that we as a city are allowed to enact minimums and maximums so long as they don't limit a unit below 800 square feet. And so the idea that because they want us to go to 1,000 square feet, we should, is in direct conflict with the law. So I do not agree with those two changes. There's nothing in state law that says we can't limit bedroom count, and I think it's appropriate, especially in a beach community where we have, units like my house that's barely 850 square feet. It's 950. There's a 100 square foot difference, and question the idea of an ADU being an accessory to a housing development or to a house if it's bigger than the house. For me, that becomes the primary use. So, and in my way, that just doesn't seem appropriate here. So I'm not in support of that. I'm fine with the cooking facility changes, and certainly don't have any issue with that. I think it's clear, and I again think our concern, at least as a commission, my concern specifically was making sure that it's clear enough for the applicant so that they know what they have to do, and as opposed to making them put in more than they need. That's sort of my overarching comment. I'm happy to propose a motion at some point if there's a concurrence to make some of the changes or unwind some of the proposed changes by staff and recommend to the city council a little bit different than what is being presented tonight. And then not because I don't agree with staff, but because I don't agree with HCD, and I think we have to be careful on how far we let them push, especially when it relates to how it hits our community and our neighborhoods.
This is Roy Donor. I totally support Vice Chair Nelson's position. And also, I just want to clarify on page 34, 5B, that's a typo, and that will be changed to a maximum, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Hi, this is Brenda. I just want to clarify. I think that the typo that Jennifer found is actually in the clean version of the ordinance, which is Exhibit B as in boy. So I found the discrepancy actually on page 24, section 5A. So along that same line, I would like to just indicate that perhaps a motion would ensure that I think the strikeout version that is actually the correct version. I want to make sure the clean version is consistent with the strikeout version. Sorry for the confusion.
Thank you. I see it on that page.
I think the mistake is also in 5B, the last sentence.
Yeah, I'm finding some inconsistencies between the clean version and the strikeout version. That's why I think for clarification that the action would be ensuring that the clean version is consistent with the strikeout version.
Right, so on page 24, 5B also has minimum. Yeah. All right, Commissioner Donor, did you have any more comments?
No.
All right, Commissioner McCann, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I have very similar feelings to Commissioner Nelson, and I'm supportive of the points that he brought up. I have a couple of additional ones which I think are very big changes from what we had come up with and very big deals. In section, well, I'm assuming it would be 4B, right above 5A and B. Multifamily zoning districts, they changed it to allow one ADU. We had per multifamily development, and they changed it to structure. And that could be a very big difference in units, depending on the layout and so forth of the multifamily development. So I take issue with that. I like it the way we had it as development and not structure. And then additionally, I take exception with 6, I'm sorry, where they're saying an ADU shall be subject to building separation unless a lesser separation is needed to allow for at least an 800 square foot ADU. I take huge exception with that. The building separation, if you ever talk to a building official, building codes are sacred and they're not to be violated, and they're there for a reason. There's building separation for for fire safety, for egress safety, light ventilation for windows, fire egress. There's all kinds of reasons for them, and to compromise the safety and the integrity of the building code just so that someone can have a slightly larger unit is ridiculous. So I take great exception to that separation reduction. Those are my comments.
Commissioner Murphy, do you have any comments? Commissioner Murphy?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I've been sitting here listening to all of this, and of course, what seems to be bothering me the most is what's been pointed out. The building codes are sacred, and that's why they're there, so that people know what they should be following as far as the code, and what leeway they have as far as the code, or they don't have. And from listening to all this, I don't know how one marries this with what it should be, and I that's all I can say, because I'm completely flummoxed that things can be moved around and changed this easily.
Okay, thank you for
Nope.
that. Oh, thank you, Danny. I too concur with my fellow commissioners. I think that when we did review this, we spent a lot of time and care on how we went through this and how we did word it originally. So I do concur with a lot of the exceptions voiced by both Vice Chair Nelson and also Commissioner McCann. So with that, I will open it up for a motion.
This is Vice Chair Nelson, so I'll make a motion, and I'll go slow here because there are a number of things I think need to be, so it's all clear. And so my motion would be that we approve the resolution, find the number, LCPA 19-0002/ZTA 19-002 with the following changes. First change being that we do not accept the provision or the modifications in section 4B. So it stays development as opposed to structure. The correction, I think, has been picked up as it relates to 5A and the 16 foot, whether it's minimum or max. So I think maybe just including it so that mistype gets cleaned up. I'm not sure where it's at. That we do not agree to the changes in section 6, and we leave our existing language in. And the same with the 8, which is related to the unit size and the maximum size, that we leave the language as originally agreed to by the commission. That would be my motion.
Second.
All right, Madam Secretary, if you want to poll for a vote.
Yes, we'll start with you, Chair Opal.
Aye.
Vice Chair Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Donor,
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy,
Yes.
and Commissioner McCann.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on to item number 3, Local Coastal Program Amendment LCPA 19-0003, Zone Text Amendment ZTA 19-0003, amending Dana Point Harbor Revitalization Plan and District Regulations for Planning Area 3. Is there a staff report this evening?
Yes, Sean Nicholas will provide a staff report. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Opal, Planning Commissioner Sean Nicholas, Project Planner. This is the LCPA ZTA 419-0003, particularly for provisions of the PA3 portion of the Dana Point Harbor Revitalization Plan. So on October 6, 2011, the Dana Point Harbor Revitalization Plan and District Regulations was certified by the California Coastal Commission. Since that time, the work that has been done on the harbor has been primarily focused on the commercial core area. And now that the commercial core portion is continuing to move forward, focus is turned to planning area 3 in terms of the hotel development. And the proposal here is primarily associated with replacement of the Dana Marina Inn, requesting a new market rate hotel and some other provisions associated ancillary to both of those projects. So here, and it's provided to you in your staff report, is a table just showing the, I guess you would say, the changes that were proposed by the applicant. Primarily is the fact that they're adding a 130 room market rate hotel. And to be clear, that it would be the limit on the number of market rate rooms is 130. And they are at minimum providing 100 accommodations will be needed or as part of a package to provide for those lower cost overnight accommodations or lower cost facilities. Consistent with the Coastal Act. And so it does allow for a more open-ended approach associated with those lower cost overnight rooms. You can see that the restaurant increase is directly offset by a reduction in the defined boater service facilities and the special function and meeting rooms. Overall, we have reviewed the proposed changes in terms of intensity. And based on the feedback we received for LLG and the square footage of space being proposed and modified, it has been determined that everything is consistent with the approved intensities as previously analyzed, and that it's important to note that a full CEQA analysis will be included as part of the formal development application. So just to update quickly in terms of where that component is at, the proposed project that is in process is consistent with the proposed provisions that are before the Planning Commission this evening. They are developing a shared parking and management plan, and the application at this time has not been deemed complete, but the EIR process is beginning. A contract for LSA has been approved by the City Council, and the next step will be a scoping meeting to be determined. I'd like to point out that I believe the applicant is also on the line and has prepared an application this evening, and we'll be also showing some additional renderings and proposed design components of the formal application for the development. But again, I want to make it very clear to the commission and public that the item before you this evening is simply for the language change to the revitalization plan. It is not for any kind of approval for the development proposal itself. So with that, staff, that does conclude staff presentation, and staff does recommend that the Planning Commission adopt the draft resolution recommending approval to the City Council. Staff, and I believe the applicant is on the phone call as well, are available for any questions that the Planning Commission may have.
Sorry, thank you for that report, John. Appreciate it. So I'm going to open it up for Commissioner questions to staff. So Commissioner Murphy, do you have any questions for staff on this?
No, thank you.
Commissioner McCann?
No.
Commissioner Donor?
Yes. When we're making these recommended changes, for an example, if we're reducing motor services, it shows from 8,600 to 5,800, 1,800 square feet less. And on page 20, it shows the original or existing plan, in buildings 2, 3, and 4, 3,800, 3,800, and 5,000. So when that is reduced, it looks like building 2 would have no voter services. Is that correct?
So a bit of history, and also we have Principal Planner Kirk Nelson here, who is taking the lead on the development side of the harbor project. But yes, you are correct there that the 3,600, and 5,000 definitely do not equal 8,600. And unfortunately, that was a mathematical error that was as certified by the Coastal Commission. And so because we're not making any modifications necessarily associated with those estimated existing square footages, because that's what they are. They're estimated existing square footages. There was no need to necessarily change those components. The modifications, as you can see there, have to do with the maximum square footage that will be developed for buildings 3 and 4. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Boater Service Building 2 has actually been, will be provided in terms of those facilities as part of the commercial core, if I'm not mistaken. Principal Planner Nelson, do you want to chime in on that?
That's correct. Boater Service Building 2 was part of the commercial core project originally, and it straddled the boundary line between Planning Area 3 and Planning Area 2, but that has been fully absorbed by the commercial core improvements and the substantial compliance plans that the Planning Commission reviewed. I believe it was sometime around this time last year and into the summer.
So Commissioner Donor, to answer your question, we're not losing Boater Service Building 2. It's just being handled by a different area of the harbor revitalization plan. And it's just, in essence, buildings 3 and 4 that the replacement square footages are being modified by this amendment.
And the what you said earlier, that we weren't really approving a plan, but if we're increasing the size of the restaurant, for an example, at the hotel, are we basically overriding what was done with all the public hearings and all the public meetings, so that people that already have existing food services in the harbor, that they supported this plan? Are we changing that?
So, Commissioner Donor, this is really only reflective of Planning Area 3. And so in terms of the commercial core, which is the restaurant and those types of facilities that you would normally think of as part of the existing harbor as it is today, and those square footages and those restaurants, they will not be impacted by this amendment.
Well, you're increasing the restaurant square footage by 5,000 square feet, aren't you?
Yes, that is the potential square footage of development, yes, associated with the restaurant.
When we said there's no limit on the number of less expensive rooms, is there a footprint that says we're going to fit this the second hotel in a footprint? So there's some obviously some maximum.
So there's development standards and regulations that are built into the district PA3 area that's not being, and development standards that are not being modified. And so associated with that, those are going to be more of the limiting factors. Probably, as Commissioner is well aware of, is parking is a big part of that limiting factor. And so it's going to be more of those types of issues that will limit the ultimate number of bedrooms, so the ultimate number of rooms that could be provided associated with that lower cost development, in conjunction with the needs to satisfy the Coastal Commission informal policy on the issue for the project. But again, that'll be more part of the formal development application that will come before Planning Commission probably sometime, if not end of this year, probably sometime early next year. And that's the project that Principal Planner Nelson is reviewing and managing.
So is this like the bubble plan? I mean, we're still a conceptual plan?
Conceptual, yes, sir. So we are setting some minimums and some maximums and modifying some of those square footages, but ultimately in terms of compliance and staying within those standards will be reviewed and approved as part of the formal development that will come back to the Planning Commission for a CDP and other entitlements in the future.
I guess, my thought is that the only thing that I see as a major change is we're talking about a second hotel, even though the assumption always there would be a less expensive and a market rate of accommodations. So the ins and outs, I guess, are really not firm. So I'm supportive of 2 hotels, but I don't quite feel qualified to do the ins and outs of a plan that's really not a firm plan. That's it. That's my comment.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Nelson, have any questions for staff at this time?
Yes, thank you. It relates to what we're doing tonight. So based on what I'm reading, we are effectively approving the limits of the zoning code relative to the harbor, and more specifically to the planning area 3. But what this doesn't do is we're not approving a project. I guess would be the first question. Is that accurate?
You are 100% correct.
So would there a different way to look at this be that, when we look at our zoning code and we have FARs and, some of the other nuances that control the development, that none of that creates a project. It just provides a pathway and, sort of the rails that which the property owners would have to follow relative to a project that we would then oversee or would get to review?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay, so make sure I hear you correctly. The idea that there's no project here that would go anywhere until it came back through the Planning Commission, was vetted by the public. We looked at all the impacts. Not including the idea that the Coastal Commission is going to have their own perspective here, as they have in the past. But that assuming the Coastal Commission is on board with these text amendments, as a city, we still say yes or no to the project. And just because they have the right in the zoning code to do it, if it creates an impact that we're not comfortable with, or has some other unique situation that the community doesn't like, then the project could be denied regardless. Is that true?
Yes, sir. The project itself is just beginning a very extensive review process, including a variety of ways in which the public will have an opportunity to participate in that process.
Okay, got it. Perfect. That was just a question for clarification. I've got a few comments, but I'll hold those until everybody's made their commentary or asked their questions.
All right, I think Vice Chair Nelson asked and answered my question, so I appreciate that. So I will open for public hearing. Do we have any requests for public comment at this time?
No, Chair Opal.
All right, so now I will close the public hearing.
The applicant wanted to participate, so you probably should take their comments during public hearing.
Okay, I apologize.
My apologies.
Hey, Chair Opal,
Yes.
this is Commissioner McCann. Hey, I do have a couple questions. I just want to get clarification with. Is that okay?
Oh, yes, I apologize. I thought I asked you.
And maybe you did, or maybe you didn't. I don't remember, to be honest. Couple quick ones. So this proposal, is it in compliance with whatever the Harbor Partners proposed and got approved with the county's redevelopment? Like, it's within the scope of what they approved?
So this is the document that ultimately is leading what the potential framework of development could look like, and that was through the partnership of ourselves, the County of Orange, and the Coastal Commission. So from that perspective, yes, this is amending the provisions and some of the components of PA3 consistent with that, and the property owner has signed off and allowing the applicant, which is the Harbor Partners LLC or RD Olson, their representative, to to process this project on the property, these amendments.
Okay, awesome. And then regarding CEQA, I saw somewhere that they're beginning prep on an EIR for their proposed project, but there's no CEQA thing that we have to do relative to adopting these changes?
LCPAs are exempt from CEQA review pursuant to provision section section 15265 of the CEQA guidelines, and that just states that that anything associated with the local coastal plan amendment does not require CEQA review. And as stated, once the formal project is come forward, they are beginning a full EIR process, CEQA review for the development that will come back to Planning Commission.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have no more questions.
All right, so I apologize. I will reopen the public hearing and open it up at this time for the applicant.
Yes, Chair Opal. This is Sherman Stacy, and I'm here with Anthony Rosek from R.D. Olson. We are the lessees and applicant. We have a PowerPoint we could go through, or you can choose to go through on your own. But basically, we support the staff position, and I can give you some explanation based on this PowerPoint as we follow through. Next slide, Sean.
Yes, sir.
Sean?
Yeah, we're on to
You can move
the,
it on to the next slide.
yeah, what is LCPA ZTA 19-0003?
Yes, as was indicated, Dana Point Harbor Partners is the lessee from the County of Orange. And our development is governed by your Dana Point Harbor Revitalization Plan that was certified by the Coastal Commission in 2011. Planning Area 3 was the area designated for hotels. And we have proposed, and the county has reviewed and approved the idea of having 2 hotels within Planning Area 3. The county's approval is as a landlord, not as a government body. Their approval is your approval of a CDP, which will come in the future. And what we're seeking are amendments that are contemplated in the LCP by policy 5.2, that we have to come back for an amendment if we want more than 220 hotel rooms in the location, and if we have hotel rooms that we want to have at market rate. So that is what the request is. And if it is approved by the city, we start the long road of going through the Coastal Commission. So we're trying to have a sort of parallel path that all the year we'll spend waiting for the Coastal Commission to take this up is when we'll do our EIR. It'll come back to you to be looked at for certification, and then we'll wait until the Coastal Commission acts on the LCPA before you take final action on a CDP. So if I could get the next slide.
Yes, sir. Sherman? Sherman? Tony, are you on a separate? Sounds like we heard the little beep. We might have lost the applicant.
Can we get confirmation the commissioners are still on the line?
Yes,
Vice Chair Nelson is here.
Roy Donner's here.
Jennifer Farrell, I'm on the line as well.
Roy Donner's here.
Scott McCann is here.
Jennifer Farrell, I'm on the line as well.
Ann Murphy.
Scott McCann is here.
Thank you. It seems we're getting some feedback. please mute your YouTube or Cox channel viewing if you have that up as well. Thank you.
So it sounds like we've lost the applicant, unfortunately. We can perhaps go to commissioner comments, and then if we get the applicant back, perhaps we can allow them to finish their Sherman?
Yeah, and Sean and Chairwoman Opal, maybe I can recommend just let the record reflect that we have distributed copies of the PowerPoint presentation from the applicant to the entire Planning Commission. And I am certain the Planning Commission has reviewed that PowerPoint presentation. And if they have not, so they're reviewing it right now, but the Commission does have a copy of the presentation.
This is Sherman Stacy, and I apologize. Someone hit the hang up button. I do not need to walk through the entire presentation if the Planning Commission is satisfied with their review of it. It is a rather pedestrian, simplistic presentation that kind of walks through the steps that we will end up going through before we reach the point where you will be making a decision of whether an actual project is going to be approved or not. In order to start the process, we have to design something so that the EIR has something to look at. And so we have made a proposal, but nothing you would act on tonight would approve that proposal. I would like to talk just a little bit about voter service buildings since it was raised. Voter service building 2 was transferred to the commercial core in accordance with a shift of land between the visitor serving and the commercial core, which staff was authorized to approve, provided it didn't exceed a 5% threshold. That was done, so that's where building service 2 will be. Because the Marina development is designing the fewest slip off of the commercial area, and because much of these voter service buildings end up being office structures, they aren't simply the things that serve the voter, the showers and the restrooms and things, they are the offices above them in the square footages that are allowed. We are going to have a one-level voter service facility that will generally simply serve voters. All of the office facilities are being moved to the commercial core, and 6,800 square feet is a more than ample size area to serve the number of votes that will be off of Planning Area 3. So I'll leave it to your pleasure if you want me to continue on to walk through this, or if you wish me to stop. And if you're prepared to move forward, that is what we would like to see. This is a very difficult process because of how long the Coastal Commission takes on their review of local coastal plan amendments, which I'm sure you're already familiar with from past years. So through the chair, I would like to
Nelson, I'm comfortable moving forward without going any further with the applicant. I've read all of this myself, so just sake of discussion.
All right, thank you, Sherman, for that presentation.
I think that then we would prefer to hear your discussion because that's important to us, and we will withdraw from further comment.
All right, thank you for that presentation, Sherman. So I will now close the public hearing and open it up for commissioner discussion. So if I have a volunteer to kick it off.
This is Roy. I'll be happy to. I think the one slide is that says what would the LCPA/ZTA 19003 do. Specifically, those points are what we're being asked to approve, which is clearer than to me than what normally we would propose what we're approving. And maybe it's simpler for the planning group that's walked through this before, but we're being asked to approve 220 rooms, provide 2 separate hotels up to 269 rooms, 1 lower cost, and a second hotel with no more than 130 rooms, and the voter parking meets the requirements, and boater services are incorporated within the hotel structure. So that is specifically what I'm comfortable approving. I'm done.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Murphy, do you have any comments?
I think less is best at this point, and so I would go as far as the governor in that sense.
All right, thank you. Commissioner McCann, any comments?
I'm supportive of what the R.D. Olson and Harbor Partners are doing here, and look forward to the process moving forward and seeing the end result. So I'll be supportive of this action.
All right, thank you. And then Vice Chair Nelson, any comments?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I think if I reflect back on the past year and a half, 2 years, what I think we've seen clearly a portion of, and I'd hate to say just a portion, but reflective of what the partnership is delivering, which is they're doing a great job. They've got a track record. What I would go on one step further, I'd call it a great track record, from keeping boaters from revolting in what probably was a process that wasn't easy, to working closely with the existing businesses, and now taking them on likely one of the more difficult issues of, how do you lay out the harbor and the hotel, and then when you add in sort of the track record of the hotel partner, and you look at projects like the one down in Newport Beach, which if you don't know about it, it's definitely worth taking a look at. But it's a wonderful project where the old city hall used to be, and the idea that we have R.D. Olson as part of this group tells me that the partnership, the city, the county, are doing the right things. I think the idea of more access is good. More access is what the Coastal Commission pushes hard on. Variation, I like the idea of variation as opposed to you can't be in the harbor unless you're in the affordable accommodations. And I'll keep my commentary relative to that, and not whether the idea that they're affordable isn't even verified. Anybody could stay there, but the idea that they can have multiple kinds of hotels in the harbor, I think it's a great idea. It makes our harbor more attractive. More people will stay in the harbor, and not just up on the hill and at the Monarch. And I don't think in any way would I want to create a situation where we start to, eat up the other hotels' business. And I don't think this does that. I think this is a nice addition to an old plan. The old plan was one hotel. It worked fine for 30 years or however long it's been. It's time to update that plan and refresh it. And having R.D. Olson as part of that partnership, I think makes total sense. I'm full support of this. It doesn't do anything other than allow for more flexibility and more creativity by the project team, and certainly it's just a small step in what will be a process that's very long. And dealing with the Coastal Commission hasn't been easy as of late. So for all those reasons, I'm in full support of approving this tonight.
Thank you. I don't have any further comments, so I will open it up for a motion at this time.
Vice Chair Nelson, I'll make a motion that we approve LCPA ZTA 19-0003.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Madam Secretary, if you can call for a vote.
Okay, I'll start with you, Chair Opal.
Yes.
Vice Chair Nelson,
Yes.
Commissioner Donor,
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy,
Yes.
and Commissioner McCann.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right, so that passes unanimously. So looking forward to that moving forward. So old business, we have no old business this evening. New business, we have no new business. Do we have any staff reports?
Yes, just briefly, we do not have any items for your June 8th meeting, so we will be canceling that meeting. Also, the next time we do have a regular meeting, we do anticipate offering the commissioners the opportunity to come into the chambers. There's going to be some physical improvements done to create barriers between the chairs, and also the opportunity for the public to come and provide comments. The format of that was going to be done by the city council next week. So if you want to see what it looks like, to see if you're comfortable being in the chambers when our next meeting comes about, the council will be viewed on Tuesday. So that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, open it up to the commissioners for any comments that you may have.
Vice Chair Nelson, I just say it's exciting to hear that we're going to open the doors back up, and I look forward to being there and seeing all of your faces in person.
When's that gonna be?
Sorry, could you repeat that? Were you asking when the next meeting will be?
Yes, well, when are the doors gonna open?
So our next regularly scheduled meeting will be on June 22nd.
Okay, June 22nd.
Yes.
Wonderful.
And I will be happy that you will all come back here and join me, so I won't be the only one here by myself. So with that, I will adjourn the
Wonderful.
meeting until June 22nd. Thank you.
Richard Vixoric, Mayor of Dana Point. As we navigate these uncharted waters, Dana Point residents and businesses have proven to be resilient. While we can't gather together at our favorite beaches, shops, restaurants, or trails, our connections remain strong. Now is the time to think of one another